John chapter 7. If there was anybody that, if there was anyone that everyone should have been expecting, or that everybody should have been looking for, it should have been Jesus. For thousands of years, prophets had been telling of it. They had been speaking of it. And every Hebrew personality that had come along, that had spoken, had mentioned, even if just but for a blip, even if just for maybe one sentence, but they had spoke of the one that was to come. The major prophets, the minor prophets, everyone had spoke. Even every one of them had spoke about it. Isaiah said it. We even sang about it in one of our hymns. Isaiah said that the one who is coming would be a Nazarene. We just said that. The prophets told of where he would be born. They spoke of what family that he would come from as well. The prophets even told about how this one to come would die also. So if there was anybody that should have been expected, if there was anybody that the people should have been looking for in the lines of the Messiah, the coming of Jesus should have been recognized. Jesus should have been able to be identified, but yet Jesus is probably one of the most misunderstood people in all of history. To ever walk the earth, Jesus is probably the most misunderstood individual. So John chapter 7, all of us know what it feels like to be misunderstood. When you begin John chapter 7, you begin it with the brothers of Jesus. He has 4 of them. It appears that he's closer maybe to one of them than the others, and that might be James. James writes an epistle, and James actually ends up becoming the head of the church at Jerusalem. Jesus has another brother. His name is Judas. Now just imagine that. You got a brother whose name is the same person, the same name of the person that's going to betray you. Do you think this is absent from the knowledge of Jesus, that he didn't know about this? With his own brother being named that, or who was to come. But so he has this brother named Judas. Now we don't really know him as Judas. We are more familiar by calling him Jude, and he wrote an epistle also. Jesus has 2 other brothers and at least 2 sisters, because it is plural when it refers to his sisters. So we know that. But in John chapter 7, his closest relatives don't understand him, and they mock him. He's misunderstood even with his closest relatives, his brothers and sisters. So let's look at verses 1 through 5. I really almost have to read. You're really going to have to read the whole chapter of John chapter 7 for yourself. 5, 6, and 7 really almost go together. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it would be good to read 5, 6, and 7 because they go back to back, a kind of a chain of events, of things that are happening, and we can see where Jesus is moving around in that area. So on your own, you'll need to read chapter 7, but we're going to read several of the verses, 1 through 5 here. After these things, Jesus was walking in Galilee. We need to understand where he's at, Galilee. So he's still in Galilee. For he was unwilling to walk to Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. So he's still in Galilee. That's where he was in chapter 6. In chapter 5, he was somewhere else. But in 6, he's in Galilee. The start of 7 says he's still there. He's unwilling to go someplace else, Judea, because people are wanting to kill him. At least as he's misunderstood, the population is going to say, do people really want to kill you? Who are you really? Who are you? Why do people want to kill you? Now, the feast of the Jews, the feast of Booths, was near. Therefore, his brothers said to him, leave here and go into Judea, so that your disciples also may see your works, which you are doing. For no one does anything in secret when he himself seeks to be known publicly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For not even his brothers were believing him. Now, if you read the first 4 verses, you might think the brothers were being an encouragement. Go, show yourself. Show yourself to your disciples. Show yourself to the population. Let the people see what you are doing. But if you understand verse 5 and the way they're speaking this, especially in verse 3, it says, therefore his brothers said to him, leave here, go into Judea, so that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. What they're saying is, get out of here. You know, you're over here in Galilee. You're in this little city. Nothing good's going to happen. You're not going to become famous. Why do people, musicians, they leave here and where do they go? They leave here and they go to Nashville or they go somewhere else. Why? So they can get seen. They can get seen if they're good. You know, at some point, you know, if they're good enough, they're going to move past singing at church. They're going to move past singing at the Kentucky Opry. They're going to move past local gigs. They're going to try to get on the national scene. And that's what his brothers are saying. His brothers are saying, Jesus is misunderstood. They don't know why he's come or what he's come to fulfill. They don't understand it quite yet. They're not believing. Verse 5 says, you need to leave here. Jesus, if you're going to be somebody on the national scene, you got to get out of here. Just go on. So basically what they're doing is mocking him. Verse 4, for no one does anything in secret when he himself seeks to be known. There you go. You don't stay around this little city of Galilee. You don't stay in your hometown. You got to get out. If you seek to be known, if you do these things, show yourself to the world. We know his brothers are mocking him. We know who you want to be. You want to be the person on prime time. We know you want to have your special. We know you want to have your name in the lights. We know you want to be the main event, the draw of the night when people come to hear the opening acts. We know you want to be the last person that leaves an impression with them. So if you want to be popular, it's not going to happen here, Jesus. You need to go show yourself to the world. Now, when they said show yourself to the world, that's basically what Satan was saying to Jesus as well when he was tempting him in the wilderness. Satan said, show yourself. Let the world know who you are, and your Father will save you. So they're mocking him because they didn't, verse 5, believe in him, for not even his brothers were believing in him. So he's misunderstood. Jesus is misunderstood with his family as well. Verses 6 through 14. So Jesus said to them, my time is not yet here, but your time is always opportune. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it, that its deeds are evil. Go up to the feast yourselves. I do not go up to this feast because my time has not yet fully come. Having said these things to them, he stayed in Galilee. But when his brothers had gone to the feast, then he himself also went up, not publicly, but as if in secret. So that's why he tells you need to look up. On your own time, you need to look up about his time. He references that a lot. My time has not yet fully come. If you continue to read further on, you will find when he says it is his time. That's what he is referring to. Now, why does he mislead his brothers? Why does he mislead the family and tell them to go on? Because he's wanting to be in secret. He's wanting to go incognito. He's wanting to go hidden under a cover. He's not wanting to be seen with the family there so he can go and be himself and not be around them. So when his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he himself went up also, not publicly, but as if in secret. Verse 11, so the Jews were seeking him at the feast and were saying, where is he? Now, if he had shown up with his family, if he had shown up with his brothers, they had been able to identify. Well, there's those brothers right there. There's a couple of the sisters. Now, where's this other brother? Where's this other person that we want to see? There was much grumbling among the crowds concerning him. Some were saying, he's a good man. Others were saying, no, on the contrary, he leads the people astray. Yet no one was speaking openly of him for fear of the Jews. But when it was now the midst of the feast, Jesus went up to the temple and began to teach. So I got to read all these verses to you so you can get the mindset, so you can get the picture in your head of what's going on. The brothers have said it's the Feast of the Booths. We'll talk about the importance of that in just a moment. It's the Feast of the Booths. They're going up to Jerusalem to celebrate this feast that they have that everybody comes together and partakes in. Everybody's going to be there. It's a big time for them. And Jesus tells his brothers, "Hey, look, you guys, you're making fun of me. You guys go on." He knows the Jews. He knows other people have misunderstood him, are mocking him. He says, "You guys go on," and he follows. They don't know he's following, but he just shows up. He shows up there as well, and where is he? He's in the temple. And he's going to start speaking. He's going to start teaching. Now, these Jews, they're already looking. The leaders, the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they're already looking for him. They're already asking. People are already talking about him. "Oh, he's a good man." "No, he's a rebel." "No, he's a really good guy." "No, he's not. He's not a good guy at all. He's misleading people." So see, these people are talking. He's misunderstood about who Jesus is. Verse 12 says there's much grumbling among the crowd. So the crowd misunderstands who he is. Verse 15, the Jews then were astonished, saying, "How has this man become so learned, having never been educated?" Because what was he doing in verse 14? He stood up teaching. He started teaching, and they're like, "Well, he didn't go to seminary, he didn't go to Bible college. We're not even sure he graduated Bible school at the VBS. He didn't get his VBS certificate. He doesn't have a chain of pins on his lapel that says he attended Sunday school for a decade in a row." And so they're saying, where did Jesus get this teaching? How is he teaching in such a manner? So they're whining. These Jews, these people are whining about him. Verse 20, the crowd answered, "You have a demon. You're speaking, you're doing all this talking, you're doing all this teaching. You have a demon. Who seeks to kill you?" So Jesus had already said, "You guys are seeking to kill me. You guys want to kill me." He's already mentioned that. See, they're whining about him teaching. They're whining about him speaking up. They're whining about him doing this, that, or the other. They have a misunderstanding. They're telling Jesus, "You don't even know what people are saying about you. How can you say this stuff? You don't know what people are saying about you." Verse 25. So some of the people of Jerusalem were saying, "Is this not the man whom they were seeking to kill?" So now they've heard. Now some of the population is in on this. "Isn't this the man?" Now I've heard some grumblings. I've heard the murmuring. Now isn't there a guy that they are wanting to kill? That they say, now isn't this him? So they're confused. They don't understand. 1 minute they're whining about, "We don't want to kill you. Nobody's going to kill you. Why do you feel misunderstood? Why do you feel this way?" And then the next moment they're saying, "Yes, isn't he the one that they are wanting to kill?" So they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Both sides. "We don't want to." "Yes, we do." "Yes, we will." Verse 32. So all this commotion is going on. All this distraction. This is supposed to be a fun time for the nation, for the Jews. It's supposed to be a big party atmosphere. It's supposed to be a big festival. It's like your Tater Day. It's like your Tater Day for Jews is what it is. And so they're having this, they've got all the vendors set up. They got all the carnival booths. They brought in some bouncy houses. They brought in some funnel cakes. They have the foot-long hot dogs, coney dogs, Philly cheesesteaks, all that good greasy food, all that smells going on, all that good fun stuff's going on. All these things are happening. And the Pharisees have heard through all of this commotion, they've heard the crowd muttering these things about him, and the chief priests and the Pharisees sent officers to seize him. So there's a disruption. It's supposed to be a fun time, supposed to be activities, supposed to be games going on, just supposed to be everybody's having this joyful celebration, but now they're hearing these murmuring, so they're going to send these officials. We got to go seize this guy. So they all misunderstand him. That's what we're looking at, this misunderstanding of who Jesus is. Is there a misunderstanding today of who Jesus Christ is? Because if you turn on the TV, they're going to say you do not need this to follow after one individual. They're going to say you do not need to follow after this Jesus Christ, this one who calls himself the Messiah, the one who forgives your sins. They're going to say there's a plethora of opportunity of ways for you to get to glory, for you to get to heaven. You will not have to search hard to seek out and find. It'll find you other avenues for you to get to heaven. I'm going to tell you where they'll lead you. They'll lead you to hell. Any avenue apart from Jesus Christ, He's the only way. Any avenue apart from Christ will lead you to hell. There is no exception, because I believe the Bible to be true. I don't believe the Quran. I don't believe Hindu teaching. I don't believe Buddha's teaching. I don't believe Muslim teaching. I don't believe any other teaching. There's only one way. As a matter of fact, Muhammad said he didn't have the answers. Jesus says He has the answers. Any other deity, self-proclaimed deity, will eventually tell you either you got to find the answer in yourself, you're going to have to sit down and meditate and cross your legs and do a couple of yoga poses to find out the meaning of life for yourself, because they, in the end, even proclaim and admit they don't have the answer. But Jesus Christ says He is the answer. So what happens when you're misunderstood? Well, when we ourselves get misunderstood, what do? We get frustrated. You've said something, you've mentioned something to a coworker, you say something to your coworker, and texting or email or some kind of communication like that, that's the worst. That's the worst, almost the worst way to communicate with somebody on something that's important or delicate or sensitive. If it's a sensitive matter, it's best to have that at least on the phone, and better not face-to-face. Why? Because you can read a person's face, right? You can read a person's emotions, reactions. You can read their body language. But how many times can you get misinterpreted or misunderstood through a text or an email? Often, many, many times. And they hurt. It hurts when you're misunderstood. It's frustrating. Somebody reads something or they hear you say something, and they get offended. They get offended, and what do? You wrote, oh, goodness gracious, I didn't say that. That's not what I meant. Where did you get that? How did you interpret what I said that way? And you roll your eyes. You let out a huff, a sigh. How did he hear that? I didn't say that. How did she hear? Where did they pick that up from? That is not what I was saying. So what do? You try to over-explain yourself then. Then you go into this long explanation of what you were trying to explain, and that person has already formulated some opinion in their mind, and it's going to be even more difficult to change. And then what does it do? It just spirals out of control. Just spirals. People get misunderstood. We're misunderstood. We can be misunderstood today. Someone says something, even in a church, somebody can say something just off the cuff, not meaning anything by it. But what happens? Somebody's feeling gets hurt, and they say, well, I'm not coming back to church. Toilet paper's supposed to go hang down, not loop backwards or something like that, you know? You know how it's supposed to be done. Paper towels, whatever. Why do they use Bounty? We can save 3 cents if we buy the Walmart brand. Oh, goodness. I'm exaggerating. But we get misunderstood. Misunderstood. Why did they do that? And we can get misunderstood in a marriage as well. And what happens when we get misunderstood in maybe an organization, a marriage, a relationship, the family? We withdraw. We just clam up, go back into, we recoil into our shell. Well, they misunderstood me. I'm just going to hold it in. I'm going to hold it in. But being misunderstood hurts. And if you ever interact with people, you will be misunderstood. At some point, it will happen. But Jesus, here's the thing though, Jesus never allows the misunderstanding about Him to shut down the mission of sharing the gospel. Jesus never allows being misunderstood amongst the population, amongst the religious leaders, to shut down His kingdom work. Why do some of us never share Jesus? We're afraid we're going to offend somebody. Afraid, well, if I say that, that might offend them, so I just best not say anything at all. I'm afraid I'll be misunderstood. If I invite them to church, they're going to say, what, do you think I'm a sinner? Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just inviting you to church, you know. But yes, since you brought it up, I believe you are a sinner. But I am too. But I am too. So what do? Since we're afraid of sharing, since we're afraid that we'll be misunderstood, we just shut up. And when you shut up, Satan gets the victory. Are you more worried about being embarrassed than you are about sharing Jesus? Which are you more worried about? If you go back to verse 1 in chapter 7, Jesus, after these things, Jesus was walking in Galilee. Like I said, chapter 5, Jesus was in Jerusalem. Chapter 6, he goes to Galilee. The beginning of chapter 7, he's still in Galilee, but he's going to be working his way, moving back to Jerusalem, going back that way. Between chapter 6, in chapter 6 and 7, there's about 6 months that separates the two. That's the time frame that you're looking at. Verse 2 tells us now the feast of the Jews, the feast of the booths. You may have tabernacles. The Feast of Tents. They're all the same thing, just depending on what version you have. Now, here's the significance of the Feast of Tabernacle or of Booths. It's like a camping trip. I already told you, it's a big happy time for them. The families, they would leave their homes. They're outside of the city of Jerusalem. They would leave their homes wherever they were, around the nation, around the country, outside of the nation. They would bring their family. We're going to take this camping trip, and all along the way, we're going to pitch this tent. Or shelter, kind of a lean-to type thing with sticks and a little roof over the top of them. We're going to pitch these tents along the way, and especially when we get to Jerusalem, we're going to set up these campsites, and the father is going to tell the family, he's going to give a recount of everything that happened in the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. He's going to tell about how God delivered them from Pharaoh in Egypt. He's going to tell about how God brought them to the Red Sea, how God parted the Red Sea. He's going to tell them about how they were searching, about how God fed them with the manna, about how God brought this quail in, about how God brought water in, how the bitter water as well, and God turned that bitter water sweet. They're going to recount all of these things that happened. Everybody loved this trip, and it was a lot of fun. Now, here's what would happen during when everybody got to Jerusalem. The priest would come out of the temple. He would come out of the temple with a pitcher, an empty pitcher, and he would traverse this mountain range, and he would go to the spring or pool of, I can't remember the name of it. It'll come to me in a moment. But he would go to this pool, this spring, and he would dip that pitcher down into it, and he would bring that pitcher of water back to the temple, back to the holy place. And he would walk around the temple once. And I guess he did it about 6 days. They did that. And he would walk around that temple one time with this pitcher, and then he would pour that water, I believe it was at the base of the altar. Pour that, and they would have sacrifices or whatever they would do there. And I guess they did that for 6 days. Then on the seventh day, the priest comes out with this golden pitcher. Does the same thing, walks over to this spring, has to traverse these mountains and get over there, bring the water back. But this time he walks around the temple 7 times. Walks around the temple 7 times this day. There's a significance there. I'll let you look that up on your own. But he walks around the temple 7 times and then pours the water. He stands up above the sacrifice with this water in his hand. He's fixing to douse the altar on that last day there. But something happens this time, and we find it in verse 37 of chapter 7. Now, on the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink." So see, there's a lot going on here. You got to know the culture. You got to know the tradition, what they are doing in this service. They've been bringing this water out every day and pouring it on the altar. Now, the last time, they're going to walk around the temple 7 times, and then they're going to pour out the water on the sacrifice. But Jesus stands up and makes this proclamation. Could you imagine the people go bonkers? They lose it. Jesus just stands up and starts testifying. You've been spilling this water all week, but if anybody's thirsty, let him come to me and drink. It's interesting. Everybody gets thirsty. Everybody is thirsty. And we get hot, we get thirsty. Parched, we're thirsty. You've been out working, you're thirsty. Working in the sun, you get thirsty. There's times when you are just craving a glass of water, a glass of cold ice water. That's the only thing that can quench your thirst. 70 to 80% of your body is made up of water. You're like a walking water balloon is what you are. You need water nearly or maybe as much as you need air. And what happens if you don't get that water? If you don't get the water, you're going to dry up. You will. You will physically dry up and your body will shut down. You will cease to exist without water. What do you do? What is one of the first things they give you when you get to the hospital or you get in an ambulance? They put a bag of IV in you, water, some kind of fluid. Got to get your fluids back. It's important. And Jesus says, you've been pouring out this water for a week. He says, if you're thirsty, you come to me. You're dehydrated, you come to me. You're dry, you come to me. You're spiritually dry. You need the spiritual nourishment of Jesus as well. If you don't get water, you're going to dry up. But if you don't have an attachment to the water of life, the living water of Jesus Christ, you're going to dry up spiritually. You're going to cease to exist as well spiritually. It's exactly what happened in John chapter 5. You remember the lame man who's sitting by the pool there. All these people are sitting by the pool, and they just can't seem to get in the water at the right time. They're going to wither up. And Jesus says, you're going about this all wrong. You're looking for answers from the world because you are spiritually thirsty. You are thirsty for something, and you've been trying to satisfy that quench with the world, what the world has to offer. Just like the lame man and the people at the pool, they were looking for what the world had to offer to meet their need. We do that as well. We go around, we're looking for the world to give something because we are feeling spiritually withered. And we think there's going to be something out there that will fulfill my need. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Let me just read these first few verses to you. The whole chapter is good as well. I said to myself, come now. This is talking about how we try to quench our thirst with the world. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. So he says, I tried to pleasure myself with everything, but it was empty. I'm still empty. Verse 2, I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it accomplish? He says, I go to every comedy club that there is. I've tried to laugh my head off, but still I'm feeling spiritually dry. It's nothing. It's done nothing for me. I explore with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, while my mind was guiding me wisely. He says, I've tried to operate my body with a little buzz. I've tried to get a little buzz on, but still have the mental power to operate and to do things. But that too has left no fulfillment in my life. Verse 4, I enlarged my works. I worked harder. I worked more. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. He said, I got my gardens. I grew my gardens. He said, I built vacation houses for my vacation houses, but yet it has all left me still empty and dry. We do that. Physical things. Surely I can put something physical in here, something concrete that I can touch. Surely that will fill my spiritual need. But as you finish reading that chapter, you can see that he says, I drank at every fountain, but I am still thirsty. I've tried it all, but I'm still thirsty. See, that's us today. We're thirsty. We're thirsty. We hear things that call us. We hear things that beckon us, that call us. Come here, try this, drink here. So what do? We run over there. Something says drink here, we run over there, we drink there, but yet we still walk away unfulfilled, unsatisfied, not satisfied. Jesus says come to Him and drink. We're wrapping this up. We're getting close here. C.S. Lewis wrote in the Chronicles of Narnia about a little girl. Her name was Jill. She enters this large, strange woods with her friend. They enter this wooded area, and she gets separated from her friend. And as she's wandering around looking for a friend, trying to find her way back, she's getting thirsty. She's getting thirsty, and she's looking for water, and she finds a stream. She finds this stream, but she is reluctant to go up to that stream because there's somebody there. Aslan, the lion. He's sitting by the stream, and he intimidates her. So here's their conversation. Are you thirsty? Said the lion. I am dying of thirst, said Jill. Then drink, said the lion. May I? Could I? Would you mind going away while I do? Said Jill. The lion answered this only by a look and a very low growl. And as Jill gazed at its motionless bulk, she realized that she might as well have asked the whole mountain to move aside for her convenience. The delicious rippling noise of the stream was driving her nearly frantic. Will you promise not to do anything to me if I come? Said Jill. I make no promises, said the lion. Jill was so thirsty now that she hadn't even noticed that she had taken a step closer. Do you eat girls? Said Jill. I have swallowed up girls and boys, women and men, kings and emperors, cities and realms, said the lion. I daren't come and drink, said Jill. Then you will die of thirst, said the lion. Oh dear, said Jill, coming another step closer. I suppose I must go and look for another stream then. There is no other stream, said the lion. She went forward to the stream, knelt down, and began scooping up water in her hand. It was the coldest, most refreshing water she had ever tasted. Now, somebody here may be desperate for a taste of living water today, a taste from a Savior today. But are you too worried what will happen to you? Jill was worried, what will happen to me if I come and taste the living water of a Savior who forgives sin? Surely there is another way. There is no other way. Any other way, you will perish. Now what happens? Here's the last thing, verse 38. What happens when you drink of that living water? Here's what happens. He who believes in me, as the Scripture said, from his innermost being will flow rivers of living water. When you admit that you are desperate for a drink of water, that you need that you've maybe misunderstood Jesus your whole life, and you are here this morning and you are ready to say, I need that drink. I need to drink from the living water because I have tried everything else that Ecclesiastes says and it's left me unfulfilled. You've been afraid to move to the most refreshing source of life that there is. But once you move there, what do you become? What happens to you then? You don't become a reservoir. What happens to a reservoir? A reservoir just drinks, just guzzles up, just consumes water, just holds water in. You are not a reservoir. You are a conduit to bless others. Once you have received Jesus Christ, then that living water flows into you and out through you to be a blessing to other people. That's what he's saying. Well, our attitude is, God, if I come to you, you bless me, bless me, bless me, bless me, bless me. God says there will be a desire in your heart for you to bless others when you come to Him. You are to be a channel to receive and then disperse and bless and lead others to that same living water. Amen. I'm going to ask you to bow your head and stand.